start over. Okay, so this is new to me, so my first recording. So this could be all crazy, and it's Zoom, so everyone has a lot of grace for people on Zoom right now. So, but I'm Courtney Reissig, and I'm the author of Teach Me to Feel, and we are having Trillia got the book out for us. So we are going to be having conversations on the Psalms with friends, and this is today we're going to talk about joy. So I invited Trillia to come and talk with me about the Psalms, and I'll let her go ahead and introduce herself to you.
Hi, I'm Trillia Newbell, and I am Courtney's friend. I'm also a writer and a acquisitions editor, and yeah, I do a number of different things. I'm also a mom and a wife.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. And she's a dear friend of mine. So we were just talking when we were not recording about how we're not just like internet friends, we're like real life friends. And so I was so excited to be able, when I first decided to do this, Trillia was the first person that came to my mind, just so I could get more time to talk to her. And we just everyone else gets to listen to us talk. So, so one of the, in this series, I'm going to ask 2 of the same questions of everyone, and then 2 new questions pertaining to what we're talking about. So the first question is, how have the Psalms ministered to you in joy or in trial, or in your different seasons of life?
Yeah, so for me, I think the Psalms have given me a kind of words for, and this is going to be about lament, even though we're talking about joy, but words for lament, because I am typically given to joy. I'm joyful, and I wouldn't say I'm optimistic, but I think I have a hopeful outlook. And so, but I've experienced a lot of sorrows. So 4 miscarriages and death, and with my sister and my father, just a lot of sorrows. I remember after my second miscarriage, having no real words to say, and the Lord bringing very kind of common psalm like Psalm 23 to my heart and head, and just reminding myself that the Lord is my shepherd and I shall not want, and being able to put words to some of those sorrows, and lamenting through really hard things was helpful. And to know that I could ask hard questions. Where are you, Lord? What is going on? Like, have you left me?
Right.
Like, yeah. And so those are also some ways that the Psalms have ministered to me. Was there a second part to that question? I can't remember.
Yeah, that's the first part. But I love how you said that, because I think whenever you read some of the Psalms, are so uncomfortable to us. Like if we heard someone saying some of the words in some of those lament Psalms out loud, and they were sitting across from us and said it, we would be like, do you trust the Lord? But it's so helpful that they're in scripture, because they remind us that God is not surprised by those cries of where are you, God? It's such a comfort to people who are in grief. So yeah, that's I have the same experience as well with the Psalms. Yeah. So when you think of, you mentioned Psalm 23.
Yeah.
Can you think of any other Psalms that have in particular ministered to you in those seasons of life?
Yeah, I was trying to think of them. But I just focused on Psalm 23. It's interesting, because I think sometimes the Psalms have informed me more than minister, like Psalm 119, informing me of the word and the supremacy of the word, or even the first Psalm, where I'm looking for it.
It's a really big book.
Yeah, I know, that's me turning pages. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the wicked, nor stands in the way of sinners. And so just reminding myself to delight in the Lord, in the law of the Lord. And so I think it's been more helping inform which is probably interesting, because I don't know if the people think of the Psalms as informing, but for me, that's been one of the characteristics or aspects of how the Lord has used the Psalm. But he's always teaching, right? That's what his word is, for teaching and reproof, and so instructing, and so I think that's been a lot of what the Lord has done. But also, I want to go back to Psalm 23, because one of the things that the Lord has also done, I think, is to pray the Psalms. Mm-hmm. So instead of singing, because I wouldn't personally, I wouldn't know how to, even though I have bless the Lord, oh my soul, you know. We all know that one.
I know.
But praying the Psalms. And so Psalm 23, I pray a lot.
Yeah.
It's just one that the Lord has used often. And again, I know it almost seems cliche to say Psalm 23 because so many people do. Isn't it sad?
Yeah.
But it's one of my favorite Psalms.
No, it's one of my favorites. And when Ben was born, I felt like such a failure because that's the only Psalm I could remember when they were wheeling me into the OR.
Yeah.
And I thought for sure, like I could remember something else. Like I was like, everybody knows Psalm 23, and I just spent the last 3 weeks reading the Psalms all the time.
Yeah.
And all I could remember was Psalm 23, but I did need those reminders. Like I needed to remember that he was my shepherd. I needed to remember that he was with me in the valley of the shadow of death. Like I needed all of those things. And it was a long time later until I realized, oh, he was being kind to me here and giving me something that was familiar and not making me work too hard. And it makes me think of, because I'm doing, I don't think I've told you this before the recording, but I'm doing your Psalm 8 study right now personally, like in my own life. Like I'm doing the If God is for
Romans 8.
Yeah, Romans 8. I keep calling it the Psalm 8 study. I'm like,
no, I was like looking at Psalm 8.
No, I'm like, I was talking about it. I was like, it's not a Psalm study. It's Romans.
Thanks for reading that.
Yeah, no, but it's been so helpful. And Daniel, actually, I was like, I really think you should do your study. Because he was like, we listened to your TGC message. But it reminds me of the Spirit interceding for us. That like, even when you don't know what to pray, the Spirit is interceding for you. And God's answering the Spirit's prayer, that God the Father is answering the Spirit's prayer before you've even prayed it. And it made me think of Psalm 23. Like sometimes the Lord gives us Psalm 23 because he knows what we need before we even need to know to ask.
It's so true.
Yes.
It's so true. That's so good. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's a non-shameless plug for, or whatever it's called, for your study. It's really good. So, so as we move into, I wanted to talk about so we talk a lot about lament. We talk about the Psalms. That's kind of, it's predominantly Psalm. It's predominantly lament. We think of suffering, and a lot of suffering people go to the Psalms, but also the Psalm literally means praise. And so we're called to be people who praise. And when I was thinking of topics to talk about and Psalms to talk about, and I was like, joy is what we need to talk about, and there's no one more joyful that I know than you. So, and I mean, anyone who meets you knows you are a joyful person, and like you were saying even at the beginning, that joy is a lot of who you are, even though you've walked through a lot of suffering. And so, how do we think through Psalms? Like there are a lot of Psalms that talk about joy, like Psalm 103 and Psalm 145. How did those help inform how we speak of joy and praise and worship of the Lord?
Yes. Well, I love Psalm 103. It's also one of my favorites. Yes.
Okay.
Well, I think it's one of my favorites because it reminds me to preach the gospel to myself.
Oh, yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So it's so Jesus focused. And so just for your listeners, I'm just going to read a little bit of it.
Good.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me. Bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits, who forgives all your iniquity, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the pit and crowns you with steadfast love and mercy, who satisfies you with good. And it continues on with really great things. So one of the things that I love about this particular psalm is that I do forget his benefits. Mm-hmm. And it's just a reminder of all that God has done for me. So that's why I can be joyful. So like the sorrowful yet always rejoicing, because when you take your focus, not on your circumstance, but on all that God is, blessing him. That's what this is, blessing him with everything in you, even when you can't, try to remind yourself of all that he has done. He redeemed my life from the pit. And as someone who was saved at the age of 22, I know this in such a real, in a real,
I understand. Yes.
yeah, a real tangible way.
Yes.
And,
Yes.
and so the Psalms, just when you're rejoicing and thinking of the Psalms, it's drawing you back to him.
Yes.
It's a reminder of who God is and why we worship him and why we delight in him, why we find we find our satisfaction in him. So joy really is about him.
Yes.
And the joy of the Lord is my strength. That's in the Psalms. Or is that proverb? I don't remember.
Well, no one's gonna fact check us. I suppose.
You go look that up somewhere.
Yes.
That's hilarious. I can't remember where that is.
No,
but
I feel like it is in this.
But it may not be. But anyways, but I do think that there is something about drawing our I guess drawing our affection for the Lord on the Lord himself. You know, not on me, how I feel, but on the Lord himself. Like that's the source of our joy. That's the source of our satisfaction. So that to me, when I read Psalm 103, that's what I think of. Psalm 145, I will extol you, my God and King, and I will bless your name forever and ever. Here's the thing. It says every day I will bless you and praise your name forever and ever. That doesn't mean that every day we're going to be like,
yes.
You know, like
right.
Happy old jolly. That's what is great about not only the Psalms, but also the Christian walk,
right.
The call that it isn't about we're not going to be jolly in out the way that when we're blessing his name, when we're praising his name, when we're rejoicing in Jesus. Though I do think that it can lead to those feelings.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
And so I do think there is something about continually saying to ourselves, Lord, in my sorrows, I'm going to praise your name. I'm going to rejoice in you. I'm going to delight in you. There is something in our souls that can bring about feelings of happiness in the Lord, if I may. But can I say one more psalm?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you.
I think it's Psalm 95.
Okay.
Oh, come, let us sing to the Lord. Let us make a joyful noise to the rock of our salvation. Let us come into his presence with thanksgiving. Let us make a joyful noise to him with songs of praise. There are a lot of psalms that are congregational. Mm-hmm. And so I just thought there is something about the Christian walk that is not just I was going to say 100%, but so often communal in nature. And we are so individualistic that we forget that rejoicing and praise and singing and all of this is often done in community. Right. And so we see that in the Psalms a lot. They're singing, they're saying, the congregation, let's bless his name together. Let's rejoice together. Right. And iron sharpens iron. I mean, there is something about that when I know that when I go, and right now a lot of us aren't going to church.
Yeah,
so
it's so hard.
It is. Yeah. It makes this point a little harder, but we've got to try really hard not to be isolated and to communicate with each other because we need each other to remind each other to rejoice together, to praise God together. It's communal. It's kind of this communal activity as people of God.
Yes.
And so I think even the fact that we're having this conversation together, right, just to remind each other and those who are listening to have joy, to praise God, to bless his name together. So there is, I think, this beauty and community in rejoicing together. Yeah,
absolutely. And so many of the Psalms, even when they're personal in nature, end with "Oh Israel, hope in the Lord."
Yes.
which is so helpful because even our deliverances, our salvation, the ways that God provides for us are never just for ourselves.
Yes.
Therefore, like and you think about when you walk through suffering with somebody and God delivers them, even though you weren't personally delivered, you're sharing in that deliverance with them because you've seen God work and you get to praise his name and bless his name,
Yeah.
even though you weren't the one who personally experienced it. And so I think, yeah, this iron sharpening iron, there's a communal aspect to the Psalms that I think is really helpful, and shows how hard this whole isolation thing is for everybody, because we were not made to be alone.
We are. And I think that's why some people are having like really hard time. We're not. So we've got to find ways to connect in unique ways. Yeah.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So in that, if people are having a hard time, I imagine people maybe watching this are having a hard time. I know I have had a really hard time a number of times throughout all of this, depending on the day. So how would you encourage someone who is struggling to find joy right now? What would you say to them?
Well, the Lord is patient, right? So I wouldn't tell someone, muster it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and get to work and try to have joy. I think I would ask a lot of questions. So I would, start by asking, what is it? Because there could be a number of other sources for their lack of joy. And so I would try to figure out what's going on. And it could be isolation, which can be solved if you reach out to someone. Often we kind of wait for someone to reach out to us, but if we need help, we need to call somebody and say, I need, And then, so I think another thing I would encourage them, I'm really glad that you brought up Romans 8. It's my favorite chapter, which I think we're going to talk about. But I would encourage them to remind their hearts about the love of God, this everlasting love of God through Christ. So that would be another thing. But there's probably if I sat down with a friend, I'd ask them a lot of questions, draw them out to figure out the source, which is why I'm not making a blanket statement. But I would tell them also to cry out to the Lord, to cry out, to tell him exactly what you're feeling and experiencing, and then ask him to fill you with joy, or whatever it is that you're needing, and that he would satisfy you.
That's good. I love that you started with that. God is so patient, because sometimes when people are struggling to find joy in the Lord, what can be the overwhelming feeling is guilt. They don't feel differently about the Lord. And to remind yourself that God is patient, that his expectations of you are not the expectations you have of yourself often. So grateful. So I love that you started with that. So, well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about the Psalms. And
we're done.
We are done. We had 4 questions. So we are, even as I started to think about it, I was like, I don't have bandwidth to watch long things. So I imagine other people don't have bandwidth to watch. But I do want to encourage people in the Psalms. So 4 questions. So
okay, well, great.
Talk to you today.
Thank you.
All right, I'm gonna stop the recording.